Hello, everyone. I'm Kate Zimmon. Welcome to episode 16 of Tribeca New Music's Inviews. Today, we are speaking with the Division II 2023 winner of Tribeca New Music's Young Composer Competition, Liam Cummins. Hi, Liam. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, it's so great to be here.
Yeah, would you mind introducing yourself and talking a little bit about your personal and musical background?
Absolutely. Well, my name is Liam Cummins. I'm a composer. Currently, I am a undergraduate composition student at the Juilliard School. And composing began very early for me. I was really interested in music from a young age, ever since a piano was moved into my house when I was, I think, 4 or 5. And it really just, it took off there. And I didn't necessarily come from a musical family, but I came from a family who was very supportive of my musical passions and who really just had a love of learning and wanted me to have that love of learning. So it started very early, and I never really looked back since then. Music really started as a casual practice for me. It was very improvisatory. I would just sit down at the piano and play whatever sounded good to me in that moment. And though some of my compositional practices these days are very structured, I try to maintain that improvisational spirit in my artistic craft. And so, I'm very happy to be spending a couple of years in New York as a student, learning as much as I possibly can, going to a lot of concerts, and I'm just really grateful to be part of this wonderful world of music making.
Yeah, you're from the Midwest, right?
I am. I'm from near Cleveland, Ohio.
How do you like New York City?
I love New York City. I think the first thing that was so amazing to me was just the idea of being, well, I live at the Juilliard dorms right now, and they're in Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. So I can't think of any other place in the world where you're more surrounded by performances. Like just the feeling of being able to go downstairs and walk to the New York Philharmonic 10 minutes before the concert starts, and then to go to the Met Opera the next night. It's so inspiring. And I think just that being able to so frequently be on the other end of consuming the music instead of writing it is just it's very educational for me. The only drawback about New York so far is I love hiking and backpacking and being outside. So you definitely have to go a little further away for those kinds of opportunities. But yeah, I think it's the perfect place for me to do undergrad.
Well, great. Thanks so much for introducing yourself. We are so excited for the upcoming performance of your composition for piano and percussion, Overlooking, on October 28th at the DiMenna Center. Can you tell us some more about the composition in lieu of the upcoming world premiere? Was it written? It was written during the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Overlooking was written. It was written during the pandemic. And I guess the first thing I would say about the piece is that it was written very intentionally for two specific people. And that really had a big impact on the kind of music I wrote, because I really got to know these people and their strengths as performers and their passions and what they were really passionate about as people. And so that process was very fulfilling, and it's factored into the way I look at composing a lot since then. I guess specifically about the extra musical ideas behind Overlooking, I'd say that the title Overlooking has two connotations behind it. And the first really had to do with my compositional process, because I approached composing from a new perspective for me as I wrote Overlooking. I decided to plan out the form of the piece before I actually started writing the musical notes on paper, actually. So I would write out, the greater arc of the piece, the little events I wanted to happen, or just to get some perspective. And so in that case, I felt like I was overlooking the musical universe that I was creating. I was able to look at the bigger picture before looking at the smaller details. And so that's something I've really taken with me since then. But as I was thinking about all these things and composing the piece, I started to consider other definitions of the same word, overlooking. And one that I thought about a lot was overlooking in the sense of a failure to notice something, or an inability to see the bigger picture. Essentially the opposite definition as the one that I was considering in my compositional process. And I think that it sort of goes without saying that um, overlooking the effects of our actions on our environment, on our fellow humans, has put us in a pretty dire situation as a society, and those overlooked actions are really catching up with us uh, at an unprecedented rate these days. And so that, I mean, it's hard not to be influenced by that when you're, writing this piece of music and then you keep hearing all of these just horrible things happening in the world around you. And so that's something that was very much on my mind as I was writing this piece. So I was thinking about these two different definitions of overlooking as something that brings clarity, perspective, and overlooking as something that brings lack of clarity and chaos and destruction. So those were the two kinds of musical worlds I was inhabiting in this piece. And I guess the piece is really about the sort of the duality of those two ideas.
And you wrote it during the pandemic, right? Who were the collaborators that you?
Right. I worked with two amazing young musicians. Their names are Glenn Choi and Adrian Zaragoza. And I met them at a program called National Young Arts Week in 2022. And National Young Arts Week is, it's just a week-long program in the winter where a lot of young high school-aged artists, I was in high school at the time, get together and, share their art, put on shows and galleries and exhibits. And that was such a meaningful experience for me. It was such a concentrated, intense, deep dive into all of our artistic practices. And so the thing about an event like that is you really, really get to know people well in a short amount of time and get to know so much about who they are as musicians and what's important to them. And so and Adrian and I just really hit it off and talked a lot about music and about life in those weeks. And by the end of the program, I think we all really wanted to work with each other. And so we started a collaboration. We decided we wanted to work together. I would write them a piece. And it was pretty, as collaborations tend to be, it was pretty hazy in the beginning. We didn't really know the details about what would happen or how we'd bring it together. Because I live in Ohio near Cleveland. Glenn lives in Texas. Adrian lives in California. And of course, this is the middle of the pandemic. So the program, Young Arts Week, was on Zoom. So we'd never met each other in person, despite feeling this really close artistic connection. And all of a sudden we were discussing, a 20-minute piece and meeting in person to record it or perform it. So it all happened very quickly. But at the same time, I remember thinking a lot, oh my goodness, this is never going to happen. We're going to have this piece, everything's going to be planned out. It'll never get performed. Life gets in the way. And honestly, I mean, we were all high schoolers in the process of applying for undergraduate music programs. So it was a pretty crazy time in our lives. But we did make it work. We brought it all together. We pretty much totally independently organized a recording session where they flew into Cleveland, Ohio, and they met each other. We all met each other the day before that recording, which is crazy to me. They rehearsed the piece for hours and hours and hours, and then the next day they had a 10-hour recording session where they were pretty much playing the whole time, and it was amazing to see it all come together. It really was.
So this is the world premiere at the DiMenna Center, but you have a recording that was the.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, and this is interesting because we had really hoped to perform it originally in a year ago, but the pandemic got in the way. We were able to all come together, but we weren't able to gather an audience in a physical space. So a recording was our plan B, our second best option. But that's why I was so thrilled that Tribeca New Music is putting on this piece in a live concert. And as soon as I learned that and knew it would be the world premiere, I just really had my fingers crossed that Glenn and Adrian would somehow be able to perform it in the world premiere, and they are. So we're all so excited by that. And I've been attending their rehearsals lately, and they're sounding just amazing. So it's going to be such a great performance.
Be clear, your original collaborator is the one that inspired the piece and then record it are the same who are performing it.
That's correct. Yes. The same people I met in 2021 that we had this great idea. It really feels like a full circle moment because that was our ambition from the beginning. And, we found all these other ways to have a meaningful collaboration without performing the piece live. But now finally, it gets to happen. So that's such a fruitful experience for all three of us.
Yeah, that makes it even more exciting, honestly, for me to see it. Like I'm very excited. But there is one thing I know about piece, and that is the amount of percussion. So why don't you read that list?
So the piece is for piano and percussion, and that sounds like it sounds very short and compact. And I've had to discuss the percussion logistics with a couple of percussionists so far for the recording session and now for the concert. And I think they've all been a little bit shocked when I just kept going and going and going as I was listing the percussion. And so first of all, I'm very thankful for everyone who's bringing all those instruments together to make it possible because it is a huge list. So Adrian, of course, is playing the piano. Glenn, the percussionist, is playing a marimba, a vibraphone, a huge assortment of drums, 6 tom-toms, a bass drum, a kick drum. He's playing crotales, which are these tiny pitched cymbals that you hit with brass mallets. They make these beautiful celestial sounds. And he's playing a lot of smaller percussion, a tambourine, triangle, some gongs. And interestingly, he also plays inside the piano. He strums the piano strings with his mallets. And at the same time, Adrian, the pianist, becomes sort of a momentary percussionist, and he plays a gong to the side of him. So there's a lot of crossover. There's so many logistics to work out. Just the physicality of the performance. I really do think that like college students with our energy are the best people to perform these, because you'll see there are moments where Glenn is playing the marimba and then he frantically has to switch over and play something like another instrument 10 feet away from him. He has to put down the mallets and pick up new ones all in a second. So it's a very, very ambitious setup. And I definitely, it's a product of, I learned so much about percussion writing from writing for so many instruments. And so I'm just really glad to see it all coming together and to see them just playing so many instruments.
Yeah, wow. I haven't heard of some of those instruments, so I'm excited in action.
Yeah, it was very interesting because I mean, honestly, I feel like composers in general learn more about percussion instruments than some other musicians in other disciplines. But I mean, we're not percussionists on the whole, and so the amount of hours I spent on Zoom with Glenn asking him, like what do these mallets sound like in this register of the marimba, or should you use this setup or this setup, or yes, even like what is this instrument, like how do you use it idiomatically, because those were the instruments that we decided on for the piece, but there were even more that were in consideration. So it's a very, very intricate, complex world, percussion, and so it makes it all the more fun to write for.
Yeah, as a non-composer, I didn't even think that would be a part of the education, like not only the actual theory of composition, of course,
Uh-huh.
like a knowledge of the breadth of instruments, especially something like percussion, where I feel like every culture has like a billion percussive instruments that is not generally used.
Uh-huh.
Orchestra, I bet I couldn't name everything.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think composers tend to love using percussion and using a lot of percussion. It sort of it feels like one of my former teachers calls it the Wild West of music making, because the rules and conventions that are so have been set for centuries in terms of notation and utilization and setup. They're a little bit more relaxed and more recent developments in percussion notation, and so it definitely does make you think very, very deeply about someone else's artistic craft, how they're very physical, like how they're literally playing their instruments. And I feel like as a composer, that's the best way to write the best music, is to get inside the head of the performers. So writing for Glenn and all his instruments gave me a very intentional chance to do that. And so that's something that I really took away from writing Overlooking was just how to put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Right. Well, that was my next question. Like, how has Overlooking impacted your journey as a young composer, first of all, but also like looking forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this was such an important project for me and my development as a young composer, and I think back to it a lot when I'm composing and think about what I learned from it, what I learned from such an in-depth collaboration with the musicians. I think the first thing that I took away with it from it was this sort of architectural approach to composition, where you think about the bigger picture before worrying about the actual notes or actual measures or little things. Having that perspective is really important for me as a composer. It sort of I feel like it allows me to um, make my works more nuanced, more intricate, and just more emotionally satisfying. My teacher here at Juilliard, John Curliano, loves to say, like, you wouldn't build a building without architectural plans. So how can you go into a composition without knowing where you're going to go? Because you spend so much time writing out the actual notes of a piece, and it's such a incredibly painful feeling to have worked on a piece for hours and hours and hours and then realize I can't use any of this material. I just have to restart. And so by planning out the bigger picture of the piece first, less of that happens, and you get to make the important decisions earlier on and take lots of time to consider how you're going to bring a work from your mind into reality. And so that's something that writing Overlooking really inspired me to do more in the future. And so that's been important for me. But I think in the bigger picture, just the depth of the collaboration with Adrian and Glenn has inspired me to really want to be an active part of the music making in future pieces, not just in like writing the notes and getting the score and the parts of the performers, but being a really active participant in rehearsals, and I mean even like in very mundane tasks like arranging everything, getting the people together, supporting them, being their emotional support when they're trying to learn these really, really difficult passages that you've written. I feel like that really reminds me about why I'm a composer in the first place and why I love being a part of this musical world of just being a part of a community and coming together to make this art that we all love so much. So I think it's made me think about my role as a composer and how that is so much deeper than just writing the notes.
And yeah, the community is amazing as well. But when you find like the people who you can work easily with and that inspire you and you can kind of bounce off of, it really makes an entire project just like such an amazing experience. And I'm so happy that Overlooking was that for you.
Absolutely. It was. It's just it means so much to start working with people in an artistic sense, but then to feel like you know them so well as people too, to really understand where they're coming from in their musical lives and their personal lives, just to see their whole person being like channeled into the art that they make. And I feel like that's in a very literal way what you're doing as a composer. You're taking you and you're putting it into sounds. And so to see them taking those sounds and putting their own experiences into those sounds and then putting them out into the world, I don't think there's anything more meaningful as a composer. And that's really been evident with Adrian and Glenn, just watching them, pour over the little details of the score. And honestly, the rehearsals, we've spent just as much time talking about how the piece will be structured as we have playing, and to see the depth of their ideas and how they're interpreting my ideas. It just, there's no way to describe that feeling when everything's just clicking and you feel like you really found the right people. And it's the joy of being a musician.
Agree. It also makes you think of like the famous collaborations of the past, like how much really famous pieces of music were influenced by the musicians that were playing them at the conception.
Absolutely.
But thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything else you'd like to mention or anything else you'd like the audience to know?
Hmm. Um, well, I think this has all been said already, but I'm just so thrilled that Tribeca Music is programming the piece. I'm so thankful for all the logistics that have been handled by Preston Staley and by you and by Felix Reyes, the percussionist, for the amazing Pathos Trio, which will be performing the other half of the program. Um, they've been such a big help in just bringing together all the resources necessary to make this happen, and of course to Adrian and Glenn, who have just been such a big help in scheduling rehearsals and bringing everything together. And I mean, not even to mention their incredible artistic presences and all they've done for the piece. So I'm just I'm really grateful for everyone who's made it happen, and I'm so excited to see it all come together on October 28th.
Yes, October 28th at the DiMenna Center. Tickets are available online. You can reach our website through our Instagram, Facebook, or any of our other links online. Thank you so much for speaking with me today, Liam.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.